She never thought a spontaneous kiss would change her life forever. What started as a ruse to fool her ex turned into something much deeper. A game of pretense became real feelings and shocking truths. But when a secret came to light, their fate hung in the balance. Before diving into this thrilling story, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Emily nervously adjusted her rebellious bangs as she studied her reflection in the restaurant bathroom mirror. Tears threatened to smudge her perfectly applied makeup, but she took a deep breath, determined not to show weakness. The day had already started terribly. A rogue pigeon had knocked over her breakfast while she tried to enjoy the fresh air on her apartment balcony, and her boss, the ever-demanding Madeleine Harrington, had made her rewrite an entire article because of a mistake that, ironically, was due to her boss's own foggy glasses. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for the scene she had just witnessed at the mall jewelry store. Seeing Daniel, her ex-boyfriend of 3 years, picking out an engagement ring for another woman, felt like a punch to the gut. The same Daniel who, just 6 months ago, had sworn he wasn't ready for a serious commitment. Emily? What a surprise. To see you here. The irritatingly familiar voice made her freeze. Slowly she turned, facing exactly what she dreaded. Daniel, with his usual smug smile, and beside him Victoria Montgomery, the very definition of perfection in a Chanel dress. Daniel... Victoria. Emily forced a smile, feeling the bitter taste of bile rise in her throat. Darling, aren't you going to show your ex the gorgeous ring you just gave me? Victoria lifted her left hand, displaying a diamond that seemed capable of blinding someone under the jewelry store's fluorescent lights. Emily felt her blood boil. 3 years of dating, and the most she'd ever gotten from Daniel were gas station flowers on Valentine's Day. Now, here he was, buying a ring that probably cost more than her annual salary for a woman he'd known for less than 4 months. It's a beautiful piece, Emily managed to say, her voice steadier than she expected. It suits you perfectly, Victoria. Oh, thank you, darling. Victoria smiled, her eyes gleaming with mischief. You know, it's so wonderful when you find someone who actually wants to build a future with you, isn't it? Someone mature enough to take the next step. But don't worry, I'm sure you'll find someone someday too. It was then that Emily saw him, tall, elegant, impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit that screamed Italian tailoring. He stood near the counter, seemingly absorbed in his own jewelry search. Without a second thought, Emily did something she never imagined she'd be capable of. She strode decisively toward the stranger, her heels clicking rhythmically against the marble floor. When she got close enough, she lightly touched his shoulder. The man turned, revealing a pair of intense green eyes that caught her off guard. "I'm sorry about this," she whispered, and before she could lose her nerve, she rose onto her toes and kissed him. To her complete surprise, instead of pushing her away or calling for security, the stranger kissed her back. His lips were soft and warm, and his hands naturally found their way to her waist, as if they'd done it 100 times before. The kiss lasted only a few seconds, but when they pulled apart, Emily felt as if the world had tilted on its axis. "Sweetheart, you took your time," he said loudly, an enigmatic smile playing on his lips. "I was just picking out your engagement gift." Emily blinked several times, stunned not just by the kiss but by how effortlessly this stranger had stepped into her improvised game. Daniel and Victoria watched, mouths agape. "You must be friends with my fiancé," the stranger continued, extending his hand politely. "Nathaniel Whitmore, pleasure to meet you all." The name caused an immediate reaction in Victoria, whose eyes widened in recognition. Emily had no idea who Nathaniel Whitmore was, but he was clearly someone important. The Nathaniel Whitmore of Whitmore Enterprises," Victoria stammered, her air of superiority completely shattered. "The one and only," he replied with a charming smile, his arm still firmly around Emily's waist. "Emily and I wanted to keep our relationship quiet, but I suppose the cat's out of the bag now, isn't it, darling?" Emily could only nod, unable to form coherent words. Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain everyone in the jewelry store could hear it. "Well, it was lovely seeing you all," Nathaniel continued, "but we have a meeting with the wedding planner in 15 minutes. Shall we, sweetheart?" Without waiting for a response, he guided Emily out of the jewelry store, leaving behind a stunned Daniel and a visibly shaken Victoria. Only when they reached the mall corridor, away from prying eyes, did he loosen his hold. "I think we owe each other some explanations," he said, his smile now softer, more genuine. "How about coffee?" Emily knew she should refuse. She knew she had just done something completely insane and potentially dangerous, but there was something in Nathaniel's eyes, a mix of amusement and kindness, that made her nod in agreement. "Perfect," he replied, offering his arm like a gentleman from another era. "I know just the place nearby, and on the way you can tell me how I somehow became your fiancé without even knowing your last name." And so, on a day that had started so terribly, Emily found herself walking alongside a complete stranger, feeling for the first time in a long while that maybe fate wasn't so cruel after all. What she didn't know was that this impulsive moment was about to change her life in ways she could never have imagined. The cafe Nathaniel chose was on the top floor of the mall, an elegant space with a panoramic view of the city. Emily felt slightly out of place in her department store dress as a hostess led them to a reserved table by the window. The place exuded exclusivity, from the linen tablecloths to the fine French porcelain cups. "So," Nathaniel began after they placed their orders, "I think you owe me an interesting story." Emily flushed deeply, the reality of what she'd just done finally hitting her full force. "I'm sorry," she murmured, studying the tablecloth as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. "I don't usually go around kissing strangers in jewelry stores." "What a shame," he replied with an amused smile. "You're quite good at it." The comment made her look up, surprised by his playful tone. Nathaniel didn't seem the least bit bothered by the whole situation. "That was your ex-boyfriend, I assume?" "Daniel," she confirmed with a sigh. "We broke up 6 months ago because he wasn't ready for a serious commitment. Apparently he just wasn't ready for a serious commitment with me." "The man clearly has vision problems," Nathaniel remarked, making Emily smile for the first time since the incident. "But you intrigue me, Emily. Most people, when they run into an ex with their new girlfriend, just pretend not to see them and move on. You chose to invent an elaborate engagement story with a complete stranger. Why? Honestly, I don't even know," she admitted. "It was an impulse. When I saw Victoria with that ring, flashing that smug smile, something inside me snapped. And then I saw you there, looking, he prompted, clearly enjoying her embarrassment. "Looking like someone who could be a convincing fiancé," she finished, feeling her cheeks burn even hotter. Nathaniel laughed, a rich, genuine sound that sent a shiver through Emily's chest. "Well, given their reaction when I mentioned my name, I'd say I was more than convincing." "About that," Emily hesitated. "Who exactly are you? I mean, obviously you're someone important, but—" "Nathaniel Whitmore, 32, CEO of Whitmore Enterprises," he replied simply. "A tech company my father founded, which I took over 5 years ago." Emily swallowed hard. She was sitting across from one of the youngest and most successful businessmen in the country after kissing him without permission in a jewelry store. "Now it's my turn to make a proposal," Nathaniel said, leaning slightly over the table. "And I promise it's just as crazy as your impromptu kiss." "What kind of proposal?" "My younger brother is getting married in 3 weeks," he began, his green eyes locked on hers, "and my family has been pressuring me for months to bring a +1. Not just any +1, but someone who can convince them I've finally found the right person." Emily felt her heart race, starting to see where this was going. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend at your brother's wedding?" "Fiancé," he corrected. "After the scene at the jewelry store, we have to keep the story consistent, and it wouldn't just be for the wedding. We'd need to keep up the act for a few weeks, including some social events and family dinners." "You're serious?" "Completely," he assured her. "In return, I'm willing to offer generous financial compensation. Let's say, enough for you to start that writing project you mentioned to your friends at the jewelry store." Emily furrowed her brow. "I didn't mention anything about writing." Nathaniel smiled, a grin that blended charm and cunning. "I noticed the notebook in your bag. Moleskin, limited writer's edition. I also saw the ink stains on your hands, typical of someone who uses a fountain pen. And there's a literary festival card sticking out of your phone. Are you always this observant? Only when something or someone genuinely interests me. The comment hung between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Emily knew she should refuse. It was too crazy, even for a day that had already pushed every reasonable limit. But there was something hypnotic about Nathaniel, something that made her want to discover more. "And if I accept," she asked slowly, "what exactly would the rules of this arrangement be?" "Simple," he replied, pulling a business card from his pocket and writing something on the back. "We'd need to spend time together over the next few days, learning the details of each other's lives, creating a convincing story about our relationship. You'd need to attend some social events, meet my family, especially my mother, who is, well, let's just say she's a unique person. And after the wedding, we part amicably, each going our separate ways, you with the resources to invest in your writing career, me free from family pressure for a few months." Emily took the card he offered, studying the personal phone number written on the back in elegant script. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," he smiled, standing and adjusting his impeccable suit jacket. "You have until tomorrow night. If you accept, meet me at this address at 8 p.m. He indicated the card. "If you don't show up, I'll understand you refused, and this afternoon will just be an interesting story to tell your grandchildren." He leaned in, placing a soft kiss on her cheek. "It was a pleasure being your fiancée for a few hours, Emily." And just as suddenly as he had entered her life, Nathaniel left the cafe, leaving behind only his subtle cologne and a proposal that could change everything. Emily stayed there, twirling the card between her fingers, knowing her decision had already been made before he even walked out the door. After all, what kind of writer would she be if she turned down an adventure like this? The address on the card led Emily to one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, the kind that doesn't list prices on the menu and has a months-long waiting list. Dressed in her best black dress, a classic piece she saved for special occasions, she tried to steady her nerves as the maître d' led her to a private area. Nathaniel was already waiting, flawless in a charcoal grey suit. When he saw her, he flashed a smile that made her stomach flip. "You came," he remarked, pulling out her chair. "I admit I thought about backing out at least 10 times just today," Emily confessed, smoothing the napkin in her lap. "And what changed? Your mind?" "Curiosity," she answered honestly, "and maybe a little madness." "The best stories start that way," Nathaniel smiled, making a discreet gesture to the sommelier. "But before we dive into the details of our agreement, let's have dinner. Do you like red wine?" The next 2 hours were surprisingly pleasant. Nathaniel had a gift for making anyone feel at ease, and Emily found herself laughing at his stories about the behind-the-scenes world of corporate life. It was only after dessert, a crème brûlée she would swear was made in heaven, that he took on a more serious tone. "Now that you've accepted my proposal, we need to establish our story," he said, pulling a small notebook from his jacket. "And you need to know some crucial details about my life. Where do we start?" "With the basics. We met 8 months ago at a coffee shop downtown. You were writing your novel. I was escaping a tedious meeting. We talked about literature for hours, exchanged numbers, and the rest is history." "Simple and believable," Emily agreed. "But your family will want more details." "Exactly. That's why I prepared this." He slid an elegant folder toward her. "Here's everything you need to know about me, my family, and the company. I suggest you study it carefully." Emily opened the folder, and her eyes widened. There were dozens of pages with detailed information, personal preferences, family history, key events, even allergies and dietary restrictions. "Are you always this meticulous?" "You have to be when your mother is Eleanor Whitmore," he replied, with a half-smile. "She'll conduct a full interrogation about our relationship, and trust me, she'll notice any inconsistency." "Your mother sounds intense." "You have no idea," Nathaniel sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture Emily was beginning to recognize as a sign of nervousness. "Eleanor Whitmore is a force of nature. She built a social empire alongside my father's business empire. Every marriage, every relationship in high society goes through her scrutiny. And she doesn't approve of any of your girlfriends?" I just say she has impossible standards, he shrugged. Which reminds me, we need to work on your personal presentation. Emily felt a tightness in her chest. What's wrong with my presentation? Absolutely nothing, Nathaniel assured quickly. But my mother expects certain protocols. Do you have any plans tomorrow? No, it's my day off. Perfect. I'll send my personal stylist to your apartment. She'll help with a wardrobe suitable for the events we'll need to attend. Nathaniel, I can't accept. It's part of the agreement, he interrupted gently. Consider it a necessary investment to make our story believable. Emily bit her lip, uncertain. Everything seemed to be getting more and more complicated. There's one more thing, Nathaniel continued, his expression softening. We need to look natural together. The kiss at the jewelry store was convincing, but we have to maintain that apparent chemistry. What do you suggest? In response, Nathaniel stood and extended his hand to her. Dance with me. Emily hadn't noticed before, but there was live piano music playing softly in the restaurant. She took his offered hand, letting him guide her to a small space between the tables. The first touch of Nathaniel's hand on her waist sent shivers down her spine. He led her with quiet confidence, as if they'd danced together hundreds of times before. Relax, he murmured near her ear. You're tense. Sorry, I'm not used to dancing in five-star restaurants with millionaire CEOs. Nathaniel chuckled, softly. Don't think of me as a CEO. Think of me as Nathaniel, the guy you supposedly love so much you agreed to marry him. Emily lifted her face to look at him, suddenly aware of how close they were. His green eyes had tiny golden flecks she hadn't noticed before. And how exactly did you propose to me in this fictional story of ours? He pretended to think, spinning her gently. How about, I took you on a sunset picnic, read a passage from your favorite novel, and when you least expected it, I was on one knee offering you the ring that belonged to my grandmother. Romantic, she smiled. Will your mother like it? My mother will think it's too modest, he admitted, but she'll love the family heirloom detail. Tradition is important to her. They continued dancing in silence for a few moments, their bodies moving in perfect sync. Emily caught herself thinking how easy it would be to lose herself in this fantasy, to forget it was all just an elaborate business arrangement. What are you thinking about? Nathaniel asked softly. In how all of this could go terribly wrong, she replied honestly. Or terribly right, he countered, his eyes gleaming with something Emily couldn't decipher. The music came to an end, but they remained embraced for a few more seconds that felt eternal. When they finally pulled apart, Emily felt a strange emptiness. Tomorrow we begin your intensive training, Nathaniel announced as they returned to the table. Family history, social etiquette, important events. We have a lot of work ahead. How much time do we have? 2 weeks until the first official event. A dinner at my parents' house. 3 weeks until my brother's wedding. It seems impossible to learn all of this in such a short time. Nathaniel took her hand across the table, his touch surprisingly gentle. Trust me, Emily, you're more capable than you think. And looking into his eyes at that moment, Emily almost believed she could actually make this work. What she didn't know was that this was only the beginning of a transformation that would go far beyond new clothes and etiquette lessons. Emily woke the next morning to the insistent sound of the doorbell. Still drowsy, she dragged herself to the door, wondering who could be there at that hour. When she opened it, she was met with an elegant, middle-aged woman, her hair impeccably styled, and a gaze that seemed to assess every detail. Good morning. You must be Emily. I'm Beatrice. Cortez, personal image consultant. Mr. Whitmore sent me. Before Emily could respond, Beatrice had already stepped inside, her eyes scanning every corner. Oh dear, she sighed, observing the small space. We have so much work ahead. The next few hours were a whirlwind. Beatrice seemed to have brought an entire team with her, hairstylist, makeup artist, nail specialist, even a tailor. Emily felt like a doll being dressed and primped, barely having time to process what was happening. Remember, Beatrice said as she supervised the work, you are now Nathaniel Whitmore's fiancée. Every detail matters. Clothes were discarded. Darling, polyester is a curse word in the Whitmore world. New outfits were brought in, measurements were taken. Emily watched, stunned, as her wardrobe was completely overhauled. "It's not just about expensive clothes," Beatrice explained. "It's about style, class, and above all, confidence. You need to feel like you belong beside Nathaniel." As the hairstylist worked on her hair, transforming her unruly strands into soft, elegant waves, Emily couldn't help but feel a pang of insecurity. "Beatrice," she called hesitantly, "do you really think this will work? I mean, I'm so different from their world." The consultant paused for a moment, her eyes softening for the first time that morning. "Emily, my dear, let me share a secret. Half the people in that world also feel like imposters. The difference is they've learned not to show it." With an encouraging smile, Beatrice continued, "Besides, Nathaniel wouldn't choose just anyone for this role. He saw something special in you. Our job is simply to bring out what's already there." Beatrice's unexpectedly kind words eased Emily's racing heart, but only briefly. Shortly after lunch, just as she thought she might finally have a moment of peace, the doorbell rang again. It was Nathaniel. "I came to check on the transformation," he said with a smile, stepping into the apartment. But when he saw Emily, his smile faded, replaced by pure astonishment. Emily flushed deeply under his gaze. The navy blue dress she wore hugged her curves elegantly without being vulgar, completely unlike anything she'd ever worn before. Her hair, usually tied in a messy bun, cascaded in soft waves over her shoulders. The light but precise makeup accentuated her eyes and lips. "So," she asked nervously, "what do you think?" Nathaniel seemed to take a few seconds to find his voice. "You look stunning." The compliment, spoken with such sincerity, made Emily's heart skip a beat. For a moment she almost forgot this was all an act. "Thank you," she murmured, lowering her eyes. "No, don't do that." Nathaniel stepped closer, gently lifting her chin with his fingertips. "Hold your head high. You're Emily Whitmore now. Remember? Future wife of one of the most eligible bachelors in the country. Act like it." Emily took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "You're right. Sorry, I'm still getting used to it." "Don't apologize," he smiled. "You're doing great. Now how about we test your new look in public?" "How so?" "Dinner, you and me, at one of my mother's favorite restaurants. Consider it a dress rehearsal." The nervousness came back in full force, but Emily nodded. After all, this was what she had agreed to, wasn't it? The restaurant was exactly as she had imagined. Luxurious, elegant, filled with people who looked like they'd stepped out of fashion magazines. But to her surprise, Emily felt less out of place than she'd expected. Beatrice's lessons on posture and etiquette came naturally, and she found herself navigating the French menu with a confidence she didn't know she had. It was in the middle of dessert that the first real test arrived. A sophisticated woman approached their table, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Nathaniel, darling, what a surprise to see you here." "Aunt Margaret." Nathaniel stood to greet her with kisses on the cheek. "What a pleasure. Let me introduce Emily, my fiancée." Emily's heart raced, but she maintained the serene smile Beatrice had taught her. "It's a pleasure to meet you, ma'am." "Fiancée?" Margaret arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Nathaniel, you sly thing. When did this happen? And why am I just hearing about it now?" "We wanted to keep it quiet for a while," Nathaniel replied smoothly, his hand finding Emily's on the table. "But I suppose the cat's out of the bag now, isn't it, love?" A shiver ran down Emily's spine as Nathaniel called her love so effortlessly. "Yes, we wanted to be sure before telling everyone." "Well, I'm simply delighted," Margaret exclaimed. "Eleanor will be over the moon when she hears. She'd nearly given up hope of seeing this nephew of hers married." After a few more minutes of conversation, during which Emily managed to keep her composure and even convincingly recount how Nathaniel had proposed, Margaret finally said her goodbyes, but not before promising to call Eleanor immediately with the happy news. The moment she left, Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You were amazing," Nathaniel whispered, leaning across the table. "Even I almost believed our story." "Thank you," she smiled, feeling a confusing mix of pride and apprehension. "But now your aunt will tell your mother. Are we ready for that?" Nathaniel took her hand, his green eyes locked onto hers. "Together, we're ready for anything." And, in that moment, looking at Nathaniel, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers, Emily almost believed it, that they really could face anything. What she didn't know was that the real challenge was only just beginning, and her transformation would go far beyond appearances. As they left the restaurant, arms entwined like a genuinely in-love couple, Emily wondered just how far this charade would take them, and whether her heart would survive intact when it was all over. The invitation to dinner at the Whitmore mansion arrived 3 days later, delivered by a messenger in a handmade paper envelope that looked like it cost more than Emily's monthly rent. The elegant handwriting announced an intimate family dinner for the following Saturday. "Intimate?" Emily asked Nathaniel as they rehearsed the details of their story once again in her apartment. "How many people exactly will be at this intimate dinner?" Nathaniel smiled, that lopsided grin Emily was starting to associate with potentially stressful news. "Just the closest family. My parents, my brother Christopher and his fiancée, Isabel, my sister Louise, and maybe an aunt or two. So basically a tribunal ready to judge me," Emily sighed, sinking into the couch. Nathaniel sat beside her, taking her hand in a gesture that was becoming increasingly natural between them. "Hey, look at me," he said softly. Emily lifted her eyes, meeting that intense green gaze that still left her breathless. "You'll do great. In the past few weeks you've absorbed more about etiquette, family history and social protocol than most people learn in years. But what if I make a mistake? What if your mother hates me?" "My mother hates everyone at first," he joked, coaxing a small smile from Emily. "Look, just be yourself. The polished, refined version Beatrice helped create, of course, but still you. That's the Emily I supposedly fell for, remember?" Something in his tone made Emily's heart skip. Sometimes, in moments like this, it was easy to forget this was all just an elaborate act. Saturday came far too quickly. Emily found herself in front of the mirror, adjusting for the 100th time the dress Beatrice had chosen, an emerald green design that, according to the consultant, perfectly matched Nathaniel's eyes. The thought made her blush. The limousine, because of course the Whitmore's Center limousine, arrived promptly at 7 p.m. Nathaniel waited inside, impeccable in a dark suit. "You look stunning," he complimented, his eyes tracing every detail of her outfit. "Thank you," she replied, feeling the butterflies in her stomach flutter. "You don't look so bad yourself." The Whitmore mansion was exactly as Emily had imagined, a grand neoclassical structure, with meticulously manicured gardens and an entrance straight out of a period film. As they entered, they were greeted by a stern-faced butler who led them to the living room. Emily's heart raced with every step. This was the moment of truth. Eleanor Whitmore was the first to rise when they walked in. Tall, elegant, with perfectly styled silver hair and piercing blue eyes, she exuded an aura of authority that made Emily swallow hard. "So," Eleanor said, her eyes appraising Emily from head to toe, "this is the woman who finally captured my son's heart." "Mother," Nathaniel interjected, his tone a mix of affection and warning. "This is Emily. Emily, my mother, Eleanor." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Whitmore," Emily managed to say, extending her hand. To her surprise, Eleanor pulled her into a quick but firm hug. "None of that Mrs. business, dear. You're family now. Call me Eleanor." The introductions continued. Nathaniel's father, Anthony, was a man of few words, but with a kind smile. That immediately made Emily feel a bit more at ease. Christopher, the younger brother, was practically a younger version of Nathaniel, while his fiancée Isabel looked like she had stepped straight out of a fashion magazine. Louise, the youngest sister, was the last to be introduced. In her early 20s, with a mischievous smile, she seemed the most relaxed of the group. "Finally, someone to balance out all this seriousness," Louise remarked, winking at Emily. "Welcome to the circus, sis." Dinner itself was a masterclass in everything Emily had learned over the past few weeks. Which fork to use for each course, how to hold the wine glass, how to keep the conversation light but engaging, It all flowed surprisingly naturally. It was only when the topic inevitably turned to their relationship that Emily felt her nerves return in full force. "So, Emily," Eleanor began, her casual tone barely masking her intense curiosity, "Nathaniel told us you met at a coffee shop. Tell us more about that day." Emily took a deep breath, feeling Nathaniel's hand gently squeeze hers under the table. It was now or never. "It was just an ordinary day," she began, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "I was working on my novel, battling a particularly stubborn writer's block." Nathaniel walked in, looking a little lost and very frustrated with something on his phone. She paused, glancing at Nathaniel with what she hoped was a convincing smile. "He asked to share my table since the place was packed. We started talking about literature. I was rereading 100 Years of Solitude, which, by coincidence, happens to be his favorite book." "Quite the coincidence," Eleanor remarked, her tone neutral. "Yes," Emily continued, gaining confidence. "We talked for hours, about Marquez, about writing, about life. Before we knew it, the cafe was closing. Nathaniel invited me to dinner. And, well, the rest is history." There was a silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Then, to Emily's shock, Eleanor smiled. A small, almost imperceptible smile, but undeniably a smile. "It seems my son has finally found someone who matches his intellect," she commented, raising her glass in a silent toast. The rest of the dinner passed more lightly. Emily found herself genuinely engaged in conversations about art with Anthony, swapping writing tips with Louise, who apparently had literary aspirations of her own, and even laughing at a few of Christopher's jokes. By the time they said their goodbyes late that night, Emily was left with a mix of exhaustion and euphoria. She had survived. More than that, she seemed to have been accepted, at least temporarily. In the limousine on the way home, Nathaniel surprised her by pulling her into a tight embrace. "You were incredible," he whispered in her ear, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "I think even my mother was impressed, and believe me, that's nearly impossible." Emily allowed herself to relax in his arms, feeling the warmth of his body, the subtle scent of his cologne. For a moment, she wondered what it would be like if all of this were real. If the tenderness in his voice, the spark in his eyes when he looked at her, weren't just an act. But then reality hit her like a bucket of cold water. This was an arrangement, a contract, and in a few weeks, it would all be over. As the limousine glided through the empty streets in the early morning, Emily found herself facing an uncomfortable truth. She was falling for Nathaniel Whitmore, and that might be the biggest mistake of her life. The days following the dinner at the Whitmore mansion were a whirlwind for Emily. Between intensive training sessions with Beatrice, carefully orchestrated public appearances with Nathaniel, and long nights rewriting chapters of her novel, which surprisingly flowed better than ever, she barely had time to breathe, let alone process her growing feelings for her fiancé. It was on a Wednesday afternoon, while reviewing details for a charity event that weekend, that reality hit her full force. Nathaniel had just come out of an important meeting, his jacket tossed carelessly over the office couch, his tie loose around his neck. He looked exhausted, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "How was the meeting?" Emily asked, trying to ignore the way her heart skipped when he smiled. "Exhausting," he sighed, collapsing onto the couch beside her, "but productive. We closed the deal with the Chinese investors." "Nathaniel, that's wonderful," she exclaimed, genuinely happy for him. Without thinking, Emily hugged him, only realizing what she'd done when she felt his arms wrap around her, pulling her closer. For a moment, they stayed like that, holding each other in silence. Emily could feel his heart pounding, or was it her own? When they finally pulled apart, there was an intensity in Nathaniel's gaze that left her breathless. "Emily, he began, his voice rough. The shrill ring of the phone startled them, shattering the moment. Nathaniel cursed under his breath before answering, his expression quickly shifting to something more professional. "Mother?" he said into the phone, shooting Emily an apologetic look. "Yes, of course, no, it won't be a problem, we'll be there." When he hung up, Nathaniel seemed torn between frustration and amusement. "Looks like we'll have company at the event on Saturday. My mother decided it would be a wonderful opportunity to formally introduce us to society as a couple." Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. One thing was deceiving the family at an intimate dinner. Lying to high society was entirely different. "Christopher, I don't know if I can do this," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "What if I make a mistake? What if someone finds out the truth?" He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Hey, look at me," he asked softly. When she lifted her eyes, she found his steady, confident gaze. "You're amazing, Emily. Over the past few weeks, you've faced every challenge with a grace and intelligence that surprises me every day. You can do this. We can do this. Together." There was so much sincerity in his words that Emily felt tears welling in her eyes. How could he be so perfect? And how could she be falling so hopelessly for someone who, in the end, was just fulfilling a contract? Saturday arrived far too quickly. The ballroom of the city's most luxurious hotel was decorated with a splendor that made Emily's heart race with nerves. Dressed in a dazzling gold gown that flowed like liquid water, she felt like an imposter about to be exposed. Christopher, impeccable in his tuxedo, seemed to sense her apprehension. He didn't leave her side for a second, his hand firmly entwined with hers, offering silent support. "Remember," he whispered as they entered the ballroom, "you belong in this world just as much as anyone here. Hold your head high, smile, and be the incredible woman you are." The next few hours were a whirlwind of introductions, polished conversations, and elegant dances. To her surprise, Emily found herself navigating it all with a confidence she didn't know she possessed. Maybe it was Beatrice's intensive training, or perhaps it was simply Christopher's constant, reassuring presence by her side. It was during a particularly intimate dance that the moment Emily had feared finally arrived. Eleanor Whitmore, radiant in a navy blue evening gown, approached them with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Christopher, darling," she said, her voice saccharine, "why don't you lend me your lovely fiancé for a moment? There are a few people I'd like Emily to meet." The look Christopher gave his mother was a mix of caution and resignation. "Of course, Mother," he replied, turning to Emily with an encouraging smile. "I'll be right back, love." And just like that, Emily found herself being guided by Eleanor through the ballroom, feeling like a lamb led to slaughter. "You know, dear," Eleanor began, her tone casual but with an edge of steel, "when Christopher introduced you to us, I must admit I grew intrigued. It isn't every day that my son, always so focused on his career, suddenly shows up with a fiancé." Emily felt her heart race. "Well, love sometimes catches us by surprise," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Eleanor stopped, turning to face her directly. Her blue eyes, so different from Nathaniel's, seemed to pierce her soul. "Yes, love is unpredictable, but you know what isn't? Money, power, the Whitmore name." Emily felt her blood run cold. "Mrs. Whitmore, Eleanor, dear, we're family now, aren't we?" she interrupted with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Let me be clear. I don't know who you really are or what you want with my son. But if this is some kind of scheme, an attempt to take advantage of our family's fortune and name, I will find out. And the consequences won't be pleasant." Before Emily could respond, Eleanor turned away, smiling again as if nothing had happened. "Oh, Margaret, so lovely to see you. Let me introduce Nathaniel's bride." The rest of the night passed in a blur for Emily. She smiled, chatted, danced, all on autopilot while Eleanor's words echoed in her mind. By the time they finally stepped into the limo to head home, she was physically and emotionally exhausted. "Are you okay?" Nathaniel asked, his voice laced with concern. "You look pale." Emily forced a smile. "Just tired. It's been quite a night." Nathaniel studied her for a moment, as if sensing there was more. Then, to her surprise, he pulled her close, wrapping her in a tight embrace. "You were amazing tonight," he murmured into her hair. "I don't know what I'd do without you." And there, in Nathaniel's arms, Emily let herself relax for the first time all evening. But as the limo glided through the city streets, one question lingered in her mind. How much longer could she keep up this charade? And more importantly, what would happen when the truth finally came out? What Emily didn't know was that the events of that night had set in motion a chain of events that would test not only her ability to keep up appearances, but also the very nature of her feelings for Nathaniel. The game was about to get much more complicated. The days following the charity event were a mix of apparent normalcy and underlying tension for Emily. On the surface, she and Nathaniel continued to play the perfect couple, smiling for the paparazzi, carefully orchestrated public appearances, romantic dinners at exclusive restaurants. But behind the scenes, Emily felt the weight of Eleanor Whitmore's words growing heavier each day. One particularly hectic afternoon, while reviewing preparations for yet another social event, Emily was surprised by an unexpected call. The name of Victoria, Daniel's ex-fiancée, flashed across her phone screen. Her heart racing, she answered. "Hello?" "Emily, darling." Victoria's saccharine voice came through the other end. "It's been so long. I heard the news about your engagement to Nathaniel Whitmore. How wonderful." The falsely friendly tone sent a shiver down Emily's spine. "Thank you, Victoria. It's a surprise to hear from you." "Oh, I can imagine," Victoria chuckled lightly. "Actually, I'm calling with an invitation. Daniel and I would love for you and Nathaniel to join us for dinner. You know, to put the past behind us, celebrate new beginnings." Emily's stomach twisted. Dinner with her ex and the woman he left her for? It sounded like a nightmare. But refusing might raise suspicions. "Of course," she replied, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. "I'll check with Nathaniel and get back to you to finalize the date." As soon as she hung up, Emily rushed to Nathaniel's office, interrupting him mid-video conference. He excused himself from the participants and turned to her, concern evident on his face. "What's wrong?" he asked, standing and stepping closer. Emily quickly explained the situation. As she spoke, she watched Nathaniel's expression shift from worry to determination. "This could be dangerous," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "Victoria has connections in high society. If she suspects something—" "Maybe we should decline," Emily suggested hopefully. Nathaniel shook his head. "No, that would only raise more suspicion. We'll accept, but we need to be more prepared than ever." The following days were filled with intense preparation. Beatrice was called in again, this time not just to perfect Emily's appearance, but to craft an even more elaborate backstory for the couple. Every detail was meticulously planned. How they met, places they'd visited together, little quirks they knew about each other. By the night of the dinner, Emily felt as if she were about to step into a gladiator's arena. The restaurant chosen by Victoria was, of course, one of the most exclusive in the city. When she and Nathaniel arrived, Daniel and Victoria were already waiting for them. "Emily! Nathaniel!" Victoria greeted them effusively as if they were old friends. "How wonderful to see you." Cheek kisses were exchanged, hands were shaken. Emily noticed Daniel's assessing gaze, a mix of surprise and something that seemed like regret. Dinner began tensely, with superficial chatter about the weather and work. It was Victoria who finally addressed the elephant in the room. "So, tell us, how did the two of you fall in love? It must have been a real coup de foudre, considering how quickly the engagement happened." Emily felt Nathaniel's hand squeeze hers under the table. It was their agreed signal. She would start the story and he would fill in the gaps. "Actually," Emily began, her voice surprisingly steady, "it was quite unexpected. We met at a coffee shop. I was struggling with writer's block on my novel, and Nathaniel walked in, looking frustrated with something on his phone. I had just come from a particularly stressful meeting," Nathaniel continued smoothly. "I asked to share her table since the place was packed. I noticed she was reading 100 Years of Solitude, my favorite book, and well, the conversation flowed naturally from there." Emily studied Victoria's face, searching for signs of skepticism. But the other woman seemed genuinely interested. "It's fascinating how fate works, isn't it?" Victoria remarked, casting a meaningful glance at Daniel. "Sometimes we need to go through certain experiences to find the right person." The comment hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She felt Nathaniel tense beside her. "Yes, fate has its ways," Emily replied, forcing a smile. "But I believe we also make our own choices. Nathaniel and I chose to be together, to build something meaningful. "And how long did it take for you to realize it was love?" Daniel asked abruptly, his tone bordering on hostility. Nathaniel leaned in, his arm wrapping protectively around Emily's shoulders. "For me, it was almost instantaneous," he answered, his gaze fixed on Emily. "But it took me a few weeks to admit it to myself. Emily is extraordinary. Every day with her is a discovery." The warmth in Nathaniel's eyes, the sincerity in his voice made Emily's heart skip a beat. For a moment, she almost believed it was real. The rest of the dinner passed in a mix of tension and false cordiality. When they finally said their goodbyes, Emily felt exhausted, as if she had run a marathon. In the car on the way home, the silence between her and Nathaniel was palpable. He was the one who finally broke it. "You were amazing back there," he said softly. For a moment, even I almost believed our story. Emily felt a lump form in her throat. "Nathaniel, But before she could continue, his phone rang. It was Eleanor Whitmore. "Mom," Nathaniel answered, furrowing his brow. "Yes, we were having dinner with—" "What? No, that's not possible. There must be some mistake." When he hung up, his face was pale. "What happened?" Emily asked, feeling panic rise. "My mother received an anonymous call," Nathaniel replied, his voice tense. "Someone is claiming our relationship is a sham, that we have an arrangement." Emily's world seemed to collapse. Everything they had built over the past weeks was about to crumble. And worst of all, she realized with painful clarity that she wasn't ready to let Nathaniel go. As the car moved through the night, Emily knew they were entering uncharted and dangerous waters. The storm approaching threatened not only their arrangement, but also the real feelings that had blossomed between them. The silence in Emily's apartment was deafening. She and Nathaniel had decided to meet there, away from the watchful eyes of the Whitmore mansion, to discuss the bomb that had just exploded in their lives. The anonymous call to Eleanor threatened to destroy not only the deal they'd made, but also the fragile relationship developing between them. "We need to find out who made that call," Nathaniel said, pacing the small living room. His suit jacket was thrown over a chair, his tie loose, the top buttons of his shirt undone. It was the first time Emily had ever seen him truly unraveled. "It could have been anyone," Emily replied, her voice quiet. "Victoria, Daniel, some employee, who overheard something—" "Or my own mother," Nathaniel finished, stopping abruptly. The look they exchanged was loaded with mutual understanding. Eleanor Whitmore was perfectly capable of orchestrating something like this to test the truth of their relationship. Emily sank into the couch, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. "What do we do now?" Nathaniel sat beside her, taking her hands in his. The gesture, so familiar by now, brought a comfort Emily didn't want to admit she needed. "We have two options," he began, his voice firm but gentle. "We can try to uncover the source of the leak and discredit it, or, Emily prompted, dreading the answer. "Or we can tell the truth," he concluded, his eyes locked on hers. "End the agreement now, before things get even more complicated." Emily's heart seemed to stop for a moment. Ending the agreement meant ending what exactly? Was what they had real, or just a carefully constructed illusion? "What do you want to do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Nathaniel was silent for a long moment, his thumb tracing slow circles on Emily's palm. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I don't want to end it, Emily, not the agreement, not this," he gestured between them. "What started as a contract has become something more, at least for me, but I need to know if you feel the same." Emily felt the tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally spill over. "I do," she admitted, her voice breaking. "But I'm so scared, Nathaniel. Scared that this is just a fantasy, that when the dust settles, you'll realize I don't belong in your world." Nathaniel cradled her face in his hands, wiping her tears with his thumbs. "You belong in my world because you're the one I want in it. Not the name, not the status, but you, Emily. The incredible, strong, talented woman I've come to know these past few months." And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, he kissed her. It wasn't like the staged kiss at the jewelry store or the small pecks they exchanged in public to keep up appearances. This kiss was real, deep, filled with all the unspoken feelings they'd been holding back. When they pulled apart, breathless, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. "Let's fight for this," he murmured. "Together." The moment was shattered by the shrill ring of Nathaniel's phone. It was Eleanor again. "Mom," he answered, his voice tense. "Yes, I understand. We'll be there in an hour." When he hung up, his face was serious. "My mother is calling an emergency family meeting. Apparently she has evidence she wants to discuss with us." Emily felt panic rising again. "What do we do?" Nathaniel stood up, reaching out his hand to her. "We face this head-on, together as I promised, but first we need a plan." The next 45 minutes were spent crafting a strategy. They decided that if confronted directly, they would tell a modified version of the truth. They would admit that the start of their relationship had, in fact, been an arrangement, but that real feelings had developed along the way. When they arrived at the Whitmore mansion, the atmosphere was palpably tense. In the living room, they found not only Eleanor and Anthony, but also Christopher, Isabel, and Louise. The presence of the entire family only heightened Emily's anxiety. "How nice of you to come so quickly," Eleanor began, her tone icy. "We have a serious matter to discuss." Nathaniel squeezed Emily's hand, a silent gesture of support. "What is this about, Mother?" Eleanor stood up, walking over to a side table where an envelope rested. "I received some disturbing information about the beginning of your relationship with Emily." She pulled out a few photos from the envelope. Emily felt her blood run cold as she recognized the images, her and Nathaniel at the jewelry store on the day it all began. There were also photos of them leaving the restaurant where they had made their initial agreement. "I'd like an explanation," Eleanor demanded, her gaze shifting between Nathaniel and Emily. It was Emily who stepped forward, surprising everyone, including herself. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Eleanor," she began, her voice trembling slightly but gaining strength as she spoke, "what you see in these photos is the start of something that has become far deeper and more real than any of us could have imagined." She looked at Nathaniel, drawing strength from his supportive gaze before continuing. "It's true that our first meeting wasn't exactly conventional, but what began as a misunderstanding turned into something real, something neither of us expected." Nathaniel joined her, his arm wrapping around her waist. "Mother, father, all of you," he addressed the family. "I know this may seem strange, even suspicious, but I ask that you give us the chance to explain, to show you that what Emily and I have is genuine." The silence that followed felt endless. It was Louise who broke it, to everyone's surprise. "I believe in them," she said simply. "I've seen my brother in other relationships, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at Emily." Anthony, who had been silent until then, spoke up. "Love sometimes comes from the most unexpected places, Eleanor. Perhaps we should give them the benefit of the doubt." Eleanor seemed torn, her eyes studying the couple before her intently. "And the marriage?" she finally asked. "Do you still intend to go through with it?" Nathaniel and Emily exchanged a glance. They hadn't discussed it, yet somehow they both knew the answer. "Yes," Nathaniel replied firmly, "but on our terms, in our own time. Because it's what we want, not because it's expected of us." Emily felt her heart swell with an emotion she couldn't name. There, in front of his family, Nathaniel was choosing her, choosing what they had built together. Eleanor seemed to ponder for a long moment before speaking again. "Very well," she said at last. "I'll accept your explanation for now, but I'll be watching closely." As the tension in the room slowly began to dissipate, with other family members stepping forward to offer words of support, Emily and Nathaniel shared a meaningful look. They had overcome this hurdle, but they knew many more would come. What had started as an arrangement had turned into something far more complex and profound. And now, facing the doubts and scrutiny of the world together, they would have to discover whether the love that had blossomed between them was strong enough to withstand any challenge fate threw their way. The weeks following the confrontation at the Whitmore mansion were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments for Emily and Nathaniel. What had once been a carefully orchestrated charade had become something real, tangible, yet still as fragile as a newborn. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, the couple decided to have a picnic in the park. away from prying eyes and high society's expectations. Sitting on a checkered blanket with a basket full of delicacies prepared by the Whitmore's private chef, a luxury Emily was still getting used to, they finally had the chance to talk openly about everything that had happened. "You know," Emily began, idly playing with a blade of grass, "sometimes I still wonder if any of this is real, if I'll suddenly wake up and realize it was all just an elaborate dream." Nathaniel smiled that crooked smile that always made her heart skip. "If it is a dream, I hope neither of us wakes up any time soon." He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Emily, I know everything happened in an unconventional way, but I want you to know that my feelings for you are the most real thing I've ever felt." Emily felt tears welling in her eyes. "Me too, Nathaniel. It's just, sometimes I feel like an imposter, as if at any moment someone would point a finger and shout, 'She doesn't belong here.'" Nathaniel pulled her close, wrapping her in a tight embrace. "You belong wherever I am," he murmured into her hair, "and if anyone dares to say otherwise, they'll have to deal with me." The tender moment was interrupted by the buzz of Nathaniel's phone. He frowned at the name on the screen. "It's Christopher," he said, answering the call. Emily watched Nathaniel's expression shift from concern to surprise, and then to something that looked like excitement. "Are you sure about this?" he asked his brother. No, it's a brilliant idea. I'll talk to Emily and call you back." When he hung up, his eyes were shining in a way Emily had never seen before. "What happened?" she asked, curious. Nathaniel took both of her hands in his, a wide smile spreading across his face. Christopher had an idea that could change everything. "What idea?" "He suggested we use your experience as a writer to create a new division in the company, a publishing house focused on new talent, on stories that wouldn't normally find space in the big publishing houses." Emily blinked, stunned. "But I have no experience managing a publishing house. I barely managed to publish my own book." "Exactly," Nathaniel exclaimed, thrilled. "You know the struggles, the frustrations. Imagine how many talents are out there waiting for an opportunity. With the power of Whitmore Enterprises behind us, we could revolutionize the publishing market." Emily's head spun with possibilities. A publishing house, her leading a project of this scale? It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. "But your mother," she began hesitantly. "My mother will have to." "Accept it," Nathaniel said firmly. "Besides, think about it. What better way to prove your worth to the family than by bringing a new and profitable division to the company?" Emily felt a wave of gratitude and love for Nathaniel. He wasn't just offering a business opportunity. He was giving her a chance to stand on her own, to prove her worth not as Nathaniel's fiancée, but as a competent professional. "When do we start?" she asked, a smile forming on her lips. The months that followed were an emotional roller coaster of challenges. Emily threw herself into the publishing project, spending endless hours in meetings, studying the market, and interviewing potential authors. Nathaniel was by her side every step of the way, offering support, advice, and sometimes just a shoulder to cry on when things got tough. The news of Whitmore Enterprises' new division was met with mixed reactions from the family. Eleanor, initially skeptical, began to show cautious interest as the first positive results emerged. Louise became one of the project's biggest supporters, volunteering to lead the publishing house's digital marketing strategies. One Saturday night, 6 months after the project began, Emily and Nathaniel celebrated the launch of the publishing house's first book. The event, held at an upscale bookstore downtown, was packed with journalists, literary critics, and prominent figures from the publishing world. Emily, stunning in an emerald green dress, a personal choice by Beatrice, spoke with a confidence she never knew she had. "When I began this journey," she said, her voice clear and steady, "I was just an aspiring writer with a dream. Today, I stand before you not only as a published author, but as someone committed to opening doors for other dreamers. This publishing house was born from a desire to give voice to unique stories, to perspectives often overlooked by the traditional market." She paused, her eyes meeting Nathaniel's in the crowd. He smiled proudly, and in that moment Emily felt she could conquer the world. But none of this would have been possible without the support and vision of someone very special, Nathaniel, my love, thank you for believing in me, for giving me wings to fly." The applause that followed was deafening. Emily saw tears in Nathaniel's eyes as he stepped forward to embrace her. And there, in the arms of the man she loved, surrounded by people who finally saw her for her own merits, Emily knew she had found her place. Later that night, walking hand in hand through the illuminated city, Nathaniel suddenly stopped. "What is it?" Emily asked, noticing a strange expression on his face. Nathaniel smiled, that smile that still made her heart race. "You know, there's something I've been wanting to do for weeks, but the timing never felt right." Before Emily could ask what he meant, Nathaniel was kneeling before her, a small velvet box in his hands. "Emily," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "what started as an arrangement turned into the greatest gift I've ever received. You've shown me what true love is, challenged me to be a better person, and brought light and purpose into my life. I love you, not because we need to keep up a charade, but because I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me? For real this time?" Tears streamed freely down Emily's face as she pulled Nathaniel up, kissing him with all the passion and love she felt. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. 1,000 times, yes. And there, under the city lights, with Nathaniel's grandmother's engagement ring sparkling on her finger, this time by choice, not obligation, Emily knew their love story, no matter how unlikely its beginning, was more real and more magical than any fairy tale she'd ever read or written. The future stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. And together, they were ready to write the next chapters of their lives, one page at a time. The months following Nathaniel's proposal were a mix of euphoria and chaos for Emily. Between the wedding preparations, which Eleanor insisted should be the event of the year, and managing the new publishing house, which was growing by leaps and bounds, Emily barely had time to breathe. One particularly hectic afternoon, while reviewing manuscripts from a promising debut author, Emily received an unexpected call. It was Victoria. "Emily, darling," the saccharine voice cooed from the other end of the line. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Emily furrowed, her brow surprised by the contact. "Hello, Victoria. How can I help you?" "Well, Daniel and I were talking. We know your wedding to Nathaniel is coming up, and we'd like to offer our help with the preparations. You know, to show there are no hard feelings." Victoria's falsely sweet tone sent a chill down Emily's spine. Something about that offer didn't feel right. "I appreciate the offer, Victoria, but we have everything under control. Eleanor is handling most of the arrangements." "Oh, I see," Victoria replied, barely masking the disappointment in her voice. "Well, if you change your mind, you know where to find me." "Oh, and Emily? Congratulations on the publishing house's success. Who knew you had such hidden talent, After hanging up, Emily was lost in thought. Victoria's call had left her unsettled, but she didn't have time to dwell on it now. There was an important meeting with investors in half an hour, and she needed to prepare. When she arrived at the conference room at Whitmore Enterprises, Emily was surprised to see not only Nathaniel, but also Eleanor seated at the table. "Mother?" Nathaniel asked, clearly as surprised as Emily. "I didn't know you'd be attending this meeting." Eleanor smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I thought it would be interesting to see firsthand how our new acquisition is performing." Emily's stomach twisted. Even after months of success with the publishing house, she still felt she had to prove her worth to Eleanor. The meeting unfolded tensely. Emily presented the publishing house's numbers, which were impressive for such a new operation. The investors seemed pleased, asking enthusiastic questions about future projects and expansions. Then Eleanor intervened. "These numbers are truly impressive, Emily, but I wonder how much of this success is due to the Whitmore name behind the project." The room fell silent. Emily felt her blood run cold, but she maintained her composure. "Mrs. Whitmore," she began, her voice steady, "the Whitmore name certainly opened doors for us, but what keeps those doors open is the quality of our work, the innovative vision we bring to the publishing market, and the talent of the authors we discover. Nathaniel took Emily's hand under the table, a silent gesture of support. "Mother, I believe the numbers speak for themselves. The publishing house isn't just profitable. It's discovering talents the big publishing houses have overlooked for years." Eleanor seemed to ponder for a moment before nodding slightly. "Very well. Keep up the good work." After the meeting, when they were alone, Nathaniel pulled Emily into a tight embrace. "You were amazing in there. You didn't let my mother intimidate you for a second." Emily smiled, feeling exhausted but fulfilled. "Sometimes I still wonder if she'll ever fully accept me." "She will," Nathaniel assured her. "My mother is tough, but she's not blind. She sees how hard you work, how dedicated you are. Just give it time." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Between finalizing wedding details and launching a new bestseller for the publishing house, Emily barely had time for herself. It was on a rare free evening that she decided to surprise Nathaniel. She prepared a romantic dinner at his apartment, with candles, soft music, and Nathaniel's favorite dish. When he arrived from work, his eyes lit up at the scene. "What's all this?" he asked, a wide smile spreading across his face. "I thought we deserved a night just for us," Emily replied, pulling him into a kiss. Over dinner, they talked about everything and nothing, laughing at inside jokes and reminiscing about how it all began. Then suddenly Nathaniel grew serious. "Emily, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his tone making her heart race. "What is it? Did something happen?" Nathaniel took a deep breath before continuing. "I received an offer to expand the company overseas. It would be a 2-year project based in London." Emily felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. "London? For 2 years?" "I haven't given an answer yet," Nathaniel hurried to say. "I wanted to talk to you first. It's an incredible opportunity for the company, but I don't want to do anything that could separate us." Emily fell silent for a moment, processing the information. Her mind raced with the implications. The wedding, the publishing house, the entire life they'd built together in such a short time. What if I came with you?" she finally said, surprising even herself with the suggestion. Nathaniel looked at her, stunned. "You'd do that? Leave everything here behind?" Emily took his hands in hers. "Nathaniel, what we have is more important than any physical place. The publishing house can be managed remotely, at least partially, and who knows, maybe it's an opportunity to expand into the international market." The smile that lit up Nathaniel's face was pure joy. He pulled her into a tight embrace, kissing her deeply. "I love you so much, you know that. You never cease to amaze me." That night, as they made plans for their new adventure, Emily realized just how much she'd grown and changed in the past few months. The insecure woman who had once pretended to be engaged to a stranger to impress an ex had transformed into a confident businesswoman, ready to take on the world beside the man she loved. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and possibilities, but one thing was certain: together they could face anything. The journey that had begun as a charade had turned into the truest love story Emily could have imagined, and she could hardly wait to see what the next chapter held for them. The international airport was bustling that autumn morning. Amid the hurried travelers and flight announcements, Emily and Nathaniel said their goodbyes to the Whitmore family. The decision to move to London had been met with mixed reactions, from Louise's enthusiasm to Eleanor's thinly veiled concern. "Are you sure about this?" Eleanor asked for the umpteenth time, her eyes shifting between her son and his future bride. 2 years is a long time, Nathaniel. The company needs you here." Nathaniel smiled patiently. "Mum, we've discussed this. Christopher is more than ready to take over operations here, and this expansion could be exactly what Whitmore Enterprises needs to go truly global." Emily, who had been saying goodbye to Louise, joined the group. "Besides, Eleanor," she added gently, "we plan to visit often, especially for the wedding, which will happen in 6 months, as planned." Eleanor sighed, finally relenting. To everyone's surprise, she pulled Emily into a hug. "Take good care of him," she whispered in her ear, "and of yourself too." The unexpected gesture left Emily emotional. It was the closest thing to approval she had ever received from her future mother-in-law. After the final goodbyes and promises of frequent calls, Emily and Nathaniel finally boarded the plane. Sitting side by side, their hands intertwined, they both felt a mix of anxiety and excitement for what lay ahead. "Are you nervous?" Nathaniel asked, noticing the tension in Emily's shoulders. She smiled, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. "A little, it's a big change, but I'm more excited than nervous, to be honest." "Me too," he admitted. "You know, when I think about how it all started, that day at the jewelry store, sometimes I still wonder if I'm dreaming." Emily laughed softly. "If it is a dream, I hope neither of us wakes up too soon." The flight went smoothly, and before they knew it, they were landing in London. The city greeted them with a grey sky and a light drizzle, typical weather that, strangely, made them feel welcome. The first few days were a whirlwind of appointments and adjustments. Between meetings with the local Whitmore Enterprises team and visits to potential partners for Emily's publishing house, the couple barely had time to explore their new city. It wasn't until the weekend that they finally had a chance to relax and take in the magnitude of the change in their lives. Walking hand in hand through Central Park, Emily suddenly stopped, pulling Nathaniel close. "What is it?" he asked, noticing the thoughtful expression on her face. "I was just thinking, a year ago I was a frustrated, aspiring writer, pretending to be engaged to a stranger to impress my ex. And now, look at us." Nathaniel smiled, that smile that still made her heart race. "Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it?" "Absolutely," she agreed. "You know, I think I've finally found the inspiration for my next book." "Oh?" Nathaniel raised an eyebrow, curious. "And what would it be about?" Emily smiled mysteriously. "About a woman who pretends to be engaged to a stranger and ends up finding true love in the process." "What do you think?" Nathaniel laughed, pulling her in for a kiss. "I think it'll be a bestseller." The months that followed were filled with intense work and discoveries. The expansion of Whitmore Enterprises was progressing better than expected, with Nathaniel securing strategic partnerships across Europe. Meanwhile, Emily's publishing house was making waves in the British literary market, discovering new talents and publishing works that challenged the status quo. But not everything was perfect. As the wedding date approached, the distance from family and friends began to weigh on them. Video calls with Louise and daily messages from Beatrice helped, but they couldn't fully replace physical presence. It was during one of these nights of longing that Emily had an idea. "What if we brought a piece of home to us?" she suggested to Nathaniel as they dined in their apartment overlooking the Thames. "How so?" "How about we have the wedding here in London? We could choose a beautiful venue, maybe one of those historic castles on the outskirts of the city. It would be like a modern fairy tale." Nathaniel's eyes sparkled at the idea. "That's brilliant. My mother will probably have a fit when she finds out, but I think she'll love the idea of an English castle wedding." And so the preparations for the Whitmore royal wedding, as the American press dubbed the event, began. Eleanor, to everyone's surprise, embraced the idea enthusiastically, flying to London several times to oversee the details personally. The eve of the big day arrived in the blink of an eye. Emily was in her room at the castle they had rented for the ceremony, surrounded by Louise, Beatrice, and, surprisingly, Eleanor. "Nervous, dear?" Eleanor asked, helping her adjust the veil. Emily smiled, feeling a wave of affection for the woman who had once seemed so intimidating. "A little, but more than anything, I'm happy." Eleanor took Emily's hands in hers, her eyes softening in a way Emily had never seen before. "You know, when Nathaniel first brought you home, I had my doubts. I thought it was just another one of his whims, but you changed him, Emily, made him better, and in the process you won not just his heart, but our entire family's." Eleanor's words, so unexpected and sincere, brought tears to Emily's eyes. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. It was Christopher, looking slightly pale. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have a small problem. Nathaniel is missing." Immediate panic Emily felt was quickly replaced by determination. If there was one thing the past few months had taught her, it was that together she and Nathaniel could overcome any obstacle. "Don't worry," she said, surprising everyone with her calm. "I know exactly where he is." And with that, still in her wedding dress, Emily set off to find the man who had transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined. The ending of this story had yet to be written, but one thing was certain: whatever challenge lay ahead, they would face it together. Emily strode through the castle halls with determination, her wedding dress rustling softly with each step. She ignored the surprised glances of guests and staff, focused solely on finding Nathaniel. Her heart knew exactly where he would be. When she reached the castle gardens, she saw him. Nathaniel stood at the edge of a small pond, his impeccable tuxedo contrasting with the pensive expression on his face. Hearing the sound of her footsteps, he turned, his eyes widening in surprise and admiration. "Emily?" he whispered, momentarily forgetting his own escape. "You look breathtaking." She smiled, stepping closer. "And you're about to get married. What are you doing out here?" Nathaniel lowered his gaze, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. I panicked. For a moment, everything felt so big, so real. Emily took his hands in hers, her touch gentle and reassuring. "It is real, Nathaniel. As real as the day we met in that jewelry store. As real as every moment we've shared since then." He looked into her eyes, vulnerability clear in his gaze. "What if I'm not good enough for you? What if I ruin everything?" Emily laughed softly, surprised to see the ever-confident Nathaniel Whitmore so uncertain. "My love, we've already been through so much together. We started with a lie and built the most beautiful truth I've ever known. There's nothing we can't face together." Nathaniel pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" "Years of practice writing dramatic dialogue," she teased, drawing a laugh from him. At that moment, watching the man she loved laugh, Emily had an idea. "Hey, how about we do something different?" "Like what?" Nathaniel asked, intrigued. "Well, we're already here, dressed and ready. Why don't we get married right now, just the two of us, here in this garden?" Nathaniel's eyes sparkled at the suggestion. "What about the guests? My mother will probably have a fit." Emily shrugged, a mischievous smile on her lips. "We can have the official ceremony later, but this moment, here and now, will be just ours." Without hesitation, Nathaniel pulled a small box from his pocket, the rings meant to be exchanged during the ceremony. With the lake as their witness and the sky as their canopy, they exchanged improvised but heartfelt vows. "Emily," Nathaniel began, his voice thick with emotion, "when you walked into that jewelry store and kissed me, you didn't just surprise me, you changed the course of my life. You taught me what true love is, challenged me to be a better person, and brought light to days I didn't even know were dark. I promise to love you, support you, and stand by your side through every chapter of our story, whether it's a romantic comedy or a period drama." Emily laughed through tears before making her own vows. "Nathaniel, our story started as a farce, but it turned into the most beautiful truth I've ever known. You gave me the courage to chase my dreams, the strength to face my fears, and the love to fill my heart. I promise to be your partner in every adventure, your safe harbor in every storm, and your biggest fan in every success. I love you not because we need to keep up appearances, but because I can't imagine my life without you." They exchanged the rings right there by the lake, sealing their promise with a passionate kiss. It was then that they heard applause and cheers coming from the direction of the castle. When they turned, they saw all the guests gathered on the terrace, watching the scene with smiles and tears in their eyes. Eleanor was the first to approach, surprising everyone by embracing the couple with tears in her eyes. "That was perfect," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But don't think you're getting out of the official ceremony. We have a castle full of guests waiting." And so, hand in hand with hearts overflowing with love, Emily and Nathaniel returned to the castle. The official ceremony was even more emotional, carrying the weight of the intimate moment they'd shared in the garden. During the reception, as they danced their first dance as a newly married couple, Nathaniel whispered in Emily's ear, "So, Mrs. Whitmore, ready for the next chapter?" Emily smiled, her eyes shining with happiness and anticipation. "I can't wait to write it by your side, Mr. Whitmore." As they twirled around the ballroom, surrounded by friends and family, Emily reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them there. From an impulsive kiss in a jewelry store to a fairy tale wedding in an English castle, their story was living proof that sometimes reality surpasses fiction. And so, with the sound of laughter and music in the background, Emily and Nathaniel took their first step into their new life together, ready to face whatever challenges fate had in store, always hand in hand, with hearts united. The end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope Emily and Nathaniel's journey has touched your hearts as deeply as it moved us to tell it. To keep diving into equally captivating stories, we've prepared a special playlist filled with tales that explore the highs and lows of true love. Find it by clicking the link on the left. If this story made you smile, cry, or simply believe a little more in the power of love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day, we bring new stories that explore the complexity and beauty of human relationships. We want to hear from you. In the comments, tell us what was the most emotional moment of this story for you. Or perhaps you'd like to share your own tales of unexpected love. Remember, sometimes life imitates art, and sometimes art imitates life. Who knows?